Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Pixelpalooza. We are so excited to see so many of you coming back here for the 7th session of Pixelpalooza, where today we're going to talk about multi-machine setup here, and we're going to pretend that our project is basically finished from an artist point of view and is now ready to go into rehearsals, and we need to adjust the project accordingly. Today we're going to do things a little bit differently. I will be joined today by my great colleague, David Stroud. Say hello, David.
Hi there. Hi, everybody.
So, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a senior product specialist at the Future Group. Been here for a year, and before that, I worked at NCAM for many years and Filmlight before that. So I'm really pleased to see you all today. Some of you will know me from the events we've done, but back to you now, Jonas.
Thank you, David. So, we're going to set we're just going to jump into the project in editor just to make sure that everything is as how we want it to be. So I'm going to go, we already have the project open, sorry. So we have this Pixtope calibration level. And this comes with, when you install Pixtope, you have the option to install demo project, and you can install these sample projects, which are just more basic versions of the AR and VS set. So what we're going to make sure when we are in here, we're going to ensure that we have our compositing plane, and that we have all the Pixtope actors, such as the camera root, the tracked camera, the material handler, and the post-process handler. Everything is good. And then I've also set this compositing plane up with a couple of garbage mats, just to ensure that we are getting rid of the junk on the side of the camera, which is currently zoomed in a little bit, so you can't really see much right now, but we'll remedy that in a bit. So with our scene ready, we are going to take this into live mode. I'm just going to save that. I'll launch this in live mode. And I'm basically going to give control to David. So hang on a minute. Okay, David, you have control.
Thanks very much, Jonas.
Sorry, before we continue, I'm just going to mention briefly our setup. We have, once again, we have an extra output for the screen share, which is a webcam feed. So you can see the better performance, and the better resolution is on the screen capture. We're also going to turn off our web cameras right now because our connection seems to be a bit worse than usual. So during the session, we're going to turn off our own webcams. So make sure that you have the best performance for the outputs. And then we're going to turn them back on for the Q&A at the end.
Okay, so that's us disappearing now. And what we're going to do, thanks, Jonas, we're going to start by talking through a couple of slides, which I need to bring up, which I'm not getting the, could you bring up the slides for me, Jonas? Jonas, could you bring up the slides? Is that possible? Can we bring up the slide deck? Is that possible? Sorry. Thank you very much. Sorry, a few teething problems here. I'm working from the UK, and I'm trying to dial into Norway. I'm hoping you can hear me, although it doesn't look like my audio is operational. 1 second. Hopefully you can now hear me. So I'm going to start by talking about the basics of keying and what we need in order to generate a good key. Now, there's many aspects to this, and there's a lot of prerequisites before we even get into keying. There's a few slides really to cover the basics. We don't have time to go into everything in terms of setting up a green screen. That takes a long time. But what I want to talk about is the various elements of this and how we get to the point where we can finally pull a good key. So as you can see on the left of this slide, we're going to talk about the physical screen. We're then going to talk about lighting. We're going to then talk about the camera setup. And finally, we can come down to pulling a key. It's pointless to change all of this and while you're keying. You have to, this is a sequence of events you go through. So firstly, let's look at the physical screen. If I can advance my slide. Yeah, I seem to have control problem. There we go. Okay. So physical screens. So you can see this is our screen, and it's not particularly well set up, but it gives us a chance to talk about some of the elements we need to consider. First of all, most importantly, is the dimensions of your screen. How big do you need it to be? How tall can you make it, and how wide? That depends on the height of your presenter and the height of your camera. The taller your presenter, if your camera height is low, then his head is going to clip at the top of the green screen, and we're not going to be able to see his head. So we always have to consider the camera height and the height of the presenter, but also the position of the presenter relative to the camera. The closer he is to the camera, the higher the green screen has to be behind him in order that his head doesn't get clipped off. We also have to think about the floor area. So the talent needs, if we want to see contact shadows on the floor, if we want to see the presenter's feet, there has to be a green screen for them to walk on. How deep does that green screen, does that floor have to be? Well, it's a consideration of how close they go to the wall. So a general rule of thumb is that a presenter shouldn't get closer than 2 meters to the wall for fear of getting spilled from the green screen. So we have to plan our floor to be large enough for that. Then we can think about the type of screen. You can see here that we've got a fabric screen, and these are really easy to set up, quite cheap to install, but they do suffer from a number of problems, including wrinkles that you can see here, rips and tears where they've been overstretched, and join points where they don't flow around the base to the floor. So this is a solid floor with a fabric attached to it, and you can see the crease line. A more permanent installation might use something like a Pro Site, which has plaster sections that are bolted together and then skimmed and finished to give a much smoother surface. But you only really want to do this for permanent installations. Then we have to think about the color of the screen. There are different kinds of paint, but the painting has to be very uniform. We can't afford to see any brush marks, and painted screens often need to be recoated, especially floors. Finally, we're talking about the screens, we have to think about the finish. The screen has to be as matte as possible. We do not want specular highlights coming back from the screen and causing us problems, because those are going to be issues when we come to try and key them out. We're going to get hot spots. So if I try and move on to the next slide, and this is to talk about lighting of the screen. So in terms of our lighting, we have to think about separating lighting for the screen for lighting from the talent. So first of all, to talk about lighting the screen. Now, the whole purpose of a green screen is to give us a flat and textureless finish. So we need to illuminate these walls here with flat light. If I were to position my light fixtures at the top here, at the top of the wall, and try and shine down, the first thing that would happen is I would get very bright hot spots here, followed by a fall off down the wall into a puddle of a shadow towards the bottom, and a shadow right where I don't want it, where the junction of the wall is. So even if this was a coved wall, we would still be getting problems. And it would be, what we would effectively have is a light gradient down the wall, which would be very hard for us to key out. So we would pull a key here, and then the key would be failing lower down. So we want no hot spots and no shadows. We want to light it evenly, and we don't want to have any of these sort of features that are going to cause us problems with our key, especially things like this line. So we would go over taping this. We would try and make it as invisible as possible. The last point on this slide is about lighting and overlighting your screen. Now, This comes back to the basics of what we're trying to do. This is a chroma key, and the chroma is maximized at mid luminance. So around 50% luminance is where we get our maximum saturation for chroma. If we go too bright, first of all, we don't have the same saturation, so it's far harder to pull a key. If we go too dark, then again, we're going to lose the saturation. So the ideal point is around about 50%, but in practical terms, we tend to illuminate about 30 to 50%. So it's quite a dark screen. But there are pros and cons of light screens and dark screens. If we go too dark, then our camera is going to, because of the noise inherent in camera systems, we're going to see a lot of noise in the screen, and that's going to be hard for us in our key. That's going to be hard for us to fix. If we go too bright, then there's going to be a problem with our talent lighting. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we come to camera. I'm just going to now move on here to talk about talent lighting. So this is a fairly simplistic view of lighting. Obviously, a lighting supervisor would choose to light the scene differently to this, but this is the basics of really what you need. So a three-point lighting system described here. We have to have separation between our screen lighting and our talent lighting. Otherwise, if our talent lighting is too bright, we're going to pollute the screen itself. We're going to start throwing heavy shadows onto the back wall of the screen, and everything's going to fall apart. So our talent lighting has to be fairly limited. As you can see here on the left, our main light is our key light. That's the strongest light and giving us the highlights on the character's face and the most interest. So it's bringing them alive. The fill light, again positioned off to the side, maybe 45 degrees, is to fill in the hollows and the gaps, the cheek spaces, underneath the chin, around the eye lines. If we don't use a fill light, we're going to end up with talent looking fairly dead and zombie-like. So we want to try and avoid that wherever possible. That is a reduction on the key light. We're not trying to fight the key light. We're not trying to drive shadows in both directions. Now, when we come to our backlight or rim light, that is designed to lift the character out of the scene. It's to give a little bit of a halo, a little bit of an edge effect, and to counteract the spill that we often see on the edge of a character. So a little bit about spill, just to say, if we have a good backlight, we tend to reduce the spill. Also, if we go too close to the screen, I mentioned before getting within 2 meters of the screen. If we get too close to the screen, we're going to pick up the lighting that's being used to light the screen. We're going to get too much scatter back from the screen, and our spill is going to be too heavy. So we need to move our character forward. So about 2 meters is the minimum distance from the screen. So at this stage, I want to go back, and we're going to talk about cameras a little bit as I move back to showing the camera view. So Jonas is in the scene, and the camera itself. Now we've set up our lighting in the studio to be 3400 Kelvin. Now, so we're quite warm. We've already balanced our camera. If we hadn't color balanced our camera, Jonas's skin tones would be looking awfully yellow. They don't look yellow. He looks relatively well balanced and whitish. But what we want to do now is to balance the illumination, the iris of our camera, to give him some more vibrance. Now, we're not using a strong three-point lighting system. It's very flat. So what I'm going to ask Magnus to do, if you're on the line, Magnus, if you could just increase the illumination on our camera a little bit.
Sure.
And lift him up. So we've got some more light on him. Now, this is not too bad. It's very flatly lit. If we had a key light on his face here, then we would come in with a fill. This is an artificial rim light that we have here. So without waiting any longer, what we're going to try to do is now to start to pull a key on Magnus. We would also, sorry, just before I move to that, we would also have wrapped our camera. We would have shaded our camera for the knee and the toe in order to make sure that the skin tones are absolutely pure. So once we've done this, we can only rack the camera once our lighting is correct, and only once our camera is correct can we then move to pulling the key. Okay, So now let's do that. Let's bring this into Director. And first of all, we're just going to check that our mode is in the video's color space. So I'm going to set like that first of all. And do we have a render output, Magnus, as well?
We should have. So if you could just toggle the settings.
Right, okay, so let's go into our setup. So these are the sorts of things we would be looking to do. So if I go into Video I/O, we should have a setup. Let's have a look at our routing here. And we're on this machine, yeah?
Yes, so I think you just need to resend.
So okay, we'll resend the data from the control panel, from the setup. And hopefully we would get an output. Let's do it this way. No.
Or double check the render one. Try to toggle the spigot. Studio render one on the output.
Okay. So, okay. Any thoughts
so
on this?
This might actually be an issue with the webcam. Let me double check it.
Okay. So while Magnus is doing that, I'm going to. Oh, there we go. That looks like we. So while he does that, we're going to go in and begin to have a look at the keying, setting up the keying. We still don't have a render output. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's look at the keying here. So I'm going to go into the production tab, and we're going to select our video keyer. And first thing we have to do, looking at this panel, I'm going to reset the panel so that we start from scratch, and I'm going to initialize my key. So this will now bring in a snapshot of Jonas. I'm going to capture a new frame. No, not that one. Let's go back to, we'll get one that we like of him. Okay, that looks a little bit better. And now what we're going to do is, we've already zoomed in on him, we've focused up. So what I'm going to do is now pick a value from around his head for green, and we're going to initialize the keyer this way. So that has now created the key. What I'm going to show is the state of that key. Yeah. So now, as I pull away, you can see that there's a lot of noise. It's not a bad key, it's quite soft, but there's a lot of noise around here. So what I can do is I can go back in and I can add another pick and update the key. And we can pull out and then look, and we can play this game for a little while, picking different values and updating our key. And as you can see, as we add more values to the keying solution, we end up with a much closer fit in the key here. You can see all the hair detail now is in the alpha here. There's quite good hair detail. I'm going to do this. We can do it this way. The way I tend to do things is I'm just going to clear this. Let's reset our values, and I'm going to show you a slightly different way of doing it. And we'll initialize the key, and just capture a new frame for him. And this is a way I like to pull a key. Whoops, select my background, thank you. So the delays I have here are kind of mouse issues going across to Norway, and so I'm doing this via the webinar feed from London. So it's a little bit slower than I would like. So what I've done is I've surrounded, and there's a reason why I'm doing this, is what we're trying to do is get a separation of the key from the foreground. And then by picking colors that are closer to his head, I'm going to ensure that the colors that I actually need to separate and discriminate are actually in my solution. If I went over here, you can see there's a highlight here, or there's a different color over here. That would give me a key, but is it relevant to where my talent is standing? The areas outside of this are going to be covered by garbage masks anyway. So I'm trying to get the best possible key. So let's just initialize that. We have a key now. Let's turn on our SDI output. And then let's close and have a look at my key here. So looking around him, we can see that this is really not bad. I mean, there's no holes in the key. The hair detail is good. The edge detail is good. And I have a little bit of noise out to the side, but I'm not going to fuss about this too much. What I'm going to show you is these controls here. Now, the panel has been initialized by picking the key. We have a remove background, which will tend to take a lot of this noise detail out. We also have the adjust foreground. The difference between these two sliders is our soft edge. If I were to harden this key right up by moving my background up here, we would see clumpiness at the edge, we'd see erosion at the edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this and just inch it up a little bit. Now, I'm using the mouse. What I tend to do with these, because I like to rock and roll values, is once I've selected, I can use my arrow keys and use those to increment my value. So as I go up, you can see now at the edge, we're beginning to lose all of the noise. But importantly, my key is still holding good. So if we look at this now, we turn off the alpha channel display. We can see we have a little bit of an edge there, but the hair detail is very good. I tend to also like to adjust my gamma and just change the profile and attack of the edge on the key. So that's looking pretty good. I wish we had an output we could show you. There are many other controls here we could go into. We have a Luma key that will fill in the areas. It's normally set to 0. You don't have to touch that. Our cutoff here in saturation, if we go back and look at our Luma, our alpha channel again, if I can pick the box. If I change my cutoff in saturation, this is limiting the key solution. So you'll see at some point there's a cutoff. But I'm quite happy to take the whole of the saturation into my key here. I can also do small Luma edge adjustments as well. Those are going to be really hard for you to see remotely. Oops, wrong control. Let's just reset that down, and the edge Luma just nudge that up a little. Okay. So let's now have a look again at my key. I'm pretty happy with that. I want to mention one thing about exposure control on our camera. We have, I think Magnus is taking control of the machine to try and get the output, but I want to talk about exposure control on the camera. A lot of cameras, when you rack them, or if you've got a proper video engineer, the racking engineer should control the illumination of your camera. You don't want the camera illumination to be changing on you on the fly. A lot of cameras are set up for auto exposure. And what that does is it changes the exposure for you on the fly, depending on the scene that it sees. So in our environment here, we turn off auto iris, we turn off auto exposure, because when we pull out wide, it's Magnus near the camera, can he, brilliant, what did you do? Tell me later. That's brilliant, well done. Could you zoom the camera out wide for me, please? Oh, Magnus is on the way back, I guess. So when Magnus gets back, we're just going to pull out wide and we're just going to look at the key around Jonas. So Magnus, are we in auto iris or not? He's not answering. Okay. So the problem with auto iris was on here. With our camera, as we pull out wide, okay, we can see the set here, but when we pull out wide, we're going to be seeing the surrounds, our ceiling, the walls, everything that is that is being controlled by garbage masks here. The fact that we don't see it in the scene doesn't stop the camera from seeing it. So when the camera sees that, it changes its auto exposure. So as we pull out wide, we would find that our key would change. So the general advice is either have a RACS engineer working on your keying and your illumination and making sure that it's your exposure and making sure it's constant, or turn off auto exposure on your camera. Okay, so what I would, oops, our comp plane is we're cutting off his legs there. Let's see if we can just adjust that a bit. And we'll go back into setup and production, and we will adjust here, and we will go to object, and we'll get rid of our message and our objects and search for our comp plane here. And adjust that. Is it the comp plane or the camera position, guys? I wonder. Let's see. Yeah. I'm wondering whether our camera height is right. It looks like our camera height is off. Let me just see if I can get the camera route then. Let's go back to that. And let's cancel this. And let's just go to the camera route. So the camera route will allow us to adjust within our scene if our height is slightly wrong. So let's see if we can bring him up. Yeah, okay. Well, you get the idea. We're cutting him off. We're cutting his head off. So let's leave that there. Could we try and have a look? Can we zoom in a bit tighter? And can you take a water bottle, please, Jonas? Do you have your water bottle? It's been hiding out of shot. And so we didn't put a lot of effort into that key, as you can see. What I did was I selected the background around his head. We made a little bit of a trim on the background, the removed background, to try and clean up some of the noise. And what we also did was just change the gamma edge, very little else. but you can see the clarity of that. I know a lot of people like to look at water bottles, so I thought we'd do this. And if do you want to just move that in front of your face a little bit, or just to the side of your head? And you can see the refraction through the edge of the bottle. You can see the detail of his face and a little bit of your hair detail as well. If you move it up, can you move the bottle up a little bit? There we go. So I think we've got a fairly good key there. The gremlins in the system apart, we're doing quite well. I want to actually, thanks, Jonas. What I want to do is just show you a little bit of the despill. Control here. That's 1 second. I'm struggling to get the director back. Yeah.
Let me help you with that, David.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. The taskbar isn't remaining. That's the problem. Can you bring director back for me? Right. Thank you very much. So let's go back to IKEA. And what I want to show is the despill. So automatically, the despill is set to 100%. But we can see the job that the despill is doing. All of these edges here is where we're getting pollution from the screen. Now, at the risk of putting that out of focus, can you take half a step forward, please, Jonas? And we can see here on the edge and this edge, I think it's reducing, but we're still getting a lot in his hair here. Let me just try and bring the despill back. So the distance from the screen, we're always going to need despill, but I just wanted to show you the degree to which we're having to remove. So in an ideal world, Jonas would be 2 meters away from that rear wall and we would reduce this spill problem. But just showing you there's no smoke and mirrors here. Could you, sorry, I wish we could get the director back if you can. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we turn the despill up again. So we've looked now at pulling a key here and trying to tune it. What I'm going to do is change the mode, and we're going to go from video color space, which is 422 YUV input through Unreal and out on the other side. We're going to now go into linear space. So I do that by going into my composite and selecting linear space here. Now we'll notice as things change and our output changes, also our key is going to need to be redone. But what's the purpose of linear space? Why are we doing this? Basically, video mode limits the range of our number space as we're compositing. So we have a hard cut. We don't have soft roll-offs. The idea of a linear color space is we've got infinite space. So we don't clip. We don't have to roll off. Everything is composited in a linear space, and then it is an output is applied to it, an output look is applied to it, and then it's constrained back into the output display space. So we're still using Rec 709 as our input and our output, but what we're going to be doing is doing all our compositing in linear space. That has an important benefit for us because it allows us to do other interesting things. It allows us to use post-processing effects where we can use extreme bloom, for example, in order to augment the pulled foreground. So we wouldn't be able to do this if we weren't using linear space, but the choice is yours. So we're going to go back to our IKEA. We're going to reset our panel, and because we've done this before, I'm going to try and move a little faster if the interface allows me to. Okay, so let us pull our background again. I've got to try to be away from him. If I make a pick that goes over his flesh or a part of his clothes, then I would have to just clear the pick and start again. So I'm going to initialize the key. Let's now have a look at that output. And we can see, if I close this down, it's a little bit noisier, but what we did before was just a little bit of remove background. I don't like to move this too far because 11, 12, 13, something like that, it still preserves the detail here. You can see if I get overly aggressive with this, you can see what begins to happen. We begin to lose hair detail here. So I don't want to do that. I want to keep it nice and soft and to preserve as much of Jonas's hair for as long as he can keep it. Hopefully he keeps it longer than I did. So anyway, now we said we were going to, we're just going to put these changes back in for our gamma. Out there. And we should be, I hope, we should have a reasonable key. So let's check our foreground again. Okay, so what we can see here is that he's looking quite flat, quite anemic. I mean, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if we had proper lighting on him, we had more creative lighting. But in lieu of having creative lighting, what could we do? Well, we could actually then go to our color grading. And if I look at my video here, and now I'm going to try, it's kind of hard because I'm fighting with director myself. I'm just going to reduce the UI size a little so I can scale this down an amount. Hopefully not lose my screen. Bear with me. Usually we would have director running on a second window or second monitor on our machine to do this, but we're a little bit cramped for space and to show you what we're doing. Okay, so let's move this out of the way so I can see some of the skin tones. Good. So I'm going to work in the global space on him. I'm just going to increase my saturation a little, give him a little bit of, oops, it would help if I enable it. Okay, so let's just increase my saturation a little bit, give a little bit of vibrance in the color. Maybe that's too much. I'm going to avoid contrast. I'm going to bring the gamma down just a tad to give him some more definition. So I prefer using gamma than contrast. Contrast is going to make things a little bit crunchy. And then I'm going to look at the gain. And so I'm nudging this up with the arrow keys. And maybe just a tad more on the saturation. So what I've done is I've adjusted. I think that looks better. I think that gives him a little bit more life. Obviously, if we had some decent lighting here, he would have more vibrance in his face. But what we're trying to do is take a very flat image and drive some color into it. Now, having done this, if we then decided what we wanted to actually do was grade everything together, we have the control to do that. So I can go to my final output here and enable that. And now, for example, if I change my gain, you can see what happens. Everything should reduce together. There's a little bit of a lag in the performance there, but you can see everything is moving together. So the fact that I have balanced Jonas into the scene, now I'm able to grade everything together. So that gives me much more creative control than I would otherwise have. And so I think that demonstrates some of the power of having a linear mode. What I'm now going to do is show you a bloom effect. So we've got the light behind Jonas, and I'm going to try to go into effects. We'll turn on the bloom. And we're in convolution bloom at the moment. And so if I try to wiggle this, and play with my threshold. Right, so if we now look, I mean, maybe I should just think, I could try and move this lamp unit up a little bit, but you can see now how the bloom here begins to eat into his skin, and we get a very pleasing effect from this. If you just move your head in to have the light interrupt it, or interrupt the light with your head, Jonas. Yeah. Just yeah, just stay there. So can he turn his head to the side as well, so we get a profile shot? So I'm liking what we're doing here. We have obviously the option of moving this light around to create more effects. What I'd like to do as well is just show you the defocus effect as well. So we can defocus both the CG and the foreground. Obviously, the foreground's within the camera control, but in sympathy with that, we can defocus the background. So can you focus all the way? So we're getting some nice pleasing effects there. It lends to the photorealism of the whole effect. We wouldn't be able to do this if we were working in video mode. So just to come back on that, why video mode is the way that everybody works in the industry, and it's with limited headroom on white and obviously no sub blacks. So that's the way the world works. But actually, by borrowing on the techniques from the VFX world and using a linear pipeline, we can begin to extend our creative control and bring some of the effects we see in feature films back into the broadcast environment and make some very, very pleasing creative decisions. Okay, I think with this on a keying, I mean, we could just bring the water bottle just for one last time, because hell, you know, we don't do this that often. So could you hold the water bottle up and let's see how that behaves? And you can see the glow through the bottle as well. So I think at this stage we can say that we've now completed with our keying practice, and we're going to go back and we're going to set up now for showing you the AR multi-machine control. So that's going to take us a little while. Jonas is going to wander back off screen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Magnus. What I want to do is bring up my slides and then just talk about a workflow. But if I can get there, yeah, I may need your help, Magnus, to do this. The gremlins are in the system. The taskbar I don't have control over. Yeah, could you get me the slides, please, Magnus?
Sorry, David, can you repeat?
Yes, could you get me the slides, please?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I've got a non-sticky taskbar, so it's really hard to manipulate. Okay, so what I wanted to quickly talk about, and this isn't so much of a filler, but it's more to do with our experience from the number of on-sites that we've done. We've done a huge number of events around the world, and as you hopefully go to roll out projects using Pixotope, we want to share our experience with you. There's always something you forget. There's always something that slips through the cracks. So it wouldn't matter if you've got plan A, plan B, you still need a plan C. So I've broken it down into 4 elements here: advanced planning, everything to do with setting up before we go, understanding the problem, understanding what we're going to try and deliver on site. Then you come to the logistics side of it. How many people? How do we ship equipment? Where do people stay? How do they travel? At the moment, very difficult, of course, but there aren't that many live events going on. Then we come to the on-site tech setup. What do we need to consider for that? What elements are critical? It might be just simple things like credentials to get on site. It might be security. It could be the workflow of how the cameras are brought up. When can you begin to connect? When can you get power? And then finally, the on-site delivery. So what we've done is we've put together a little checklist here. And this covers, I'm not going to talk through this. Please don't worry. It would be too boring and too long. But as we go through everything that you would need to consider before doing a live event, and hopefully this is exhausting and exhaustive as well. So the really important thing to note at the end, well, after the on-site delivery, I would say that you need to have a wrap party to reward everyone's hard work. But this will be made available to you. We'll give this to you if you wish at the end. We'll probably beautify it a little bit more than this. So let's go back to our slides. Now, just a little bit of preamble on multi-machine setup. What are we trying to achieve? This diagram shows us 3 machines working live. We have 3 tracked cameras, as you can see, each of them passing into the tracking server that's running on each of the renderers. We do that for security reasons. If we had one tracking server running on one machine and all our cameras piping into that one machine, if, heaven forbid, something went wrong with that machine, all of our tracking data would be missed. So we try and insulate ourselves. So we try to have each camera with its tracking data going into its respective host. So the tracking server here only deals with this camera. The tracking server here only deals with this camera, and there. We can always change the paths that we're talking to. We can change the UDP ports that we're listening to, and we can take a different tracking scheme if we wish. But importantly, we're not making each tracking server do 2 jobs. You can see here, just looking at the network configuration, we've got 2 sets of networks. Here, 3 machines connected. If we've got a perforce server, this would probably be going out to the internet. So we would then able to share projects, load projects down, get updates, whatever we want to do. So we would need some sort of on-site internet presence. But what we also tend to do, as a good rule of thumb, is to separate off the tracking networks. Now, tracking data is not that heavy. It isn't a lot of packets, but what is important is that it's timely. A tracking packet is only valid for the video frame to which it relates. Getting it late makes no difference to anybody. We don't use it. So it's not the amount of data, but it's the timeliness of the data, the fact that it's not contended, that it doesn't get delayed in any way, that we receive the tracking data when we need it. And the easiest way to do that is to, because these are all low bandwidth network devices, put them on their own network so that when somebody else starts a network copy, it isn't going to affect our tracking. Seen this too many times where suddenly the tracking data is being delayed, or something happens and you think, oh, what's going on? Oh, I'm just doing a download of a few gigabytes. Oh well. So we want to avoid that on a live setup. Now, each of these is showing its own monitor. We typically run director on each of these machines, and one of the directors acts as the master. So that's a typical setup. What we've got here for you today is we've got 2 systems set up, not the third. And let's just talk a little bit now about our interfaces and what we do, and then hopefully we will have got those scenes set up. So Frank covered this on day 1. If you're still with us on day 7, it's probably worth a revamp. But we have 2 main interfaces that we use in Pixitope. Our director is used for our technical setup, for our multi-machine host, for controlling our control panels, and for synchronizing. Everything from director goes via the data hub, and the data hub distributes that information to the individual directors running on each machine. Those directors communicate with the Unreal Engine, and that's how we pass flow of control. In terms of the editor, you've spent a long time in the editor this week with Frank and with Jonas. We haven't spent an awful lot of time in live, but when we're going live, we don't want unforeseen accidents happening. We want to have everything ready. The performance, one of the things that people don't necessarily realize is that when you're running an editor, your video output is taken from your viewport. So whatever size your viewport is, that is the output, your video output size. So if you've got a small viewport, guess what? Your output is going to be heavily pixelated and it's going to be very low res. So it's fine for while you're working in editor, because a lot of time you're looking at the viewport anyway. But if you're judging on your video output on your SDI feed, then you're going to get a poor quality output. The difference is when you go into live mode, the screen size is or the video output, sorry, the computer monitor display of the viewport is correctly sized for your video output, which means you get a one-to-one pixel match between the render and your output. So your quality is much better. Plus the fact everything is pretty much guaranteed to run as fast as it can. So all of your synchronization delays for your tracking, etc., should be judged in live mode, not in edit mode. Okay, so that's enough in terms of slides. I will just prove forward. All right, so we'll come to that in a minute. So now let's go and see if we can have a look at our setups on the machines. Can we
So do you want me to help you out with that, David? It's a bit easier to do that from here.
Yes.
So that was great, David. Thank you. I'm just going to switch the projects right now to the AR project. And we're just going to ensure.
I've heard your voice, Jonas. It's pleasant to hear you.
Sorry?
I said, it's a long time since I've heard your voice. It's pleasant to hear you again.
Yeah, I bet it is.
The loneliness of presenting from the UK.
So what we're going to do now is to launch both machines. You can see we have the two here available. We can launch both of them in live mode. And we're just going to make sure that our settings are set up correctly. All right, so we have just gonna hit resend. Make sure I have both machines selected, resend, so that we get the correct data going. So we have the correct video. We also need to make sure that it's set to correct gen lock, and here we are. So I guess back to you now, David.
Thanks very much for doing that. Yeah. So what can we see the other output now? So we've got another webcam. So you can see the two. If you look at the top of your screen here, you can see we've got two different views. All week we've been using this camera on the right at the top there, the wide shot, and that is taken. That's a tracked camera. That's our AR camera when we look in Director, and that's using the MOSIS tracking data. So we can move that around and we're fully tracked. As you can see, Magnus is happily moving that camera and everything's tracked there. Now, I will just mention, because if we're looking down here, you can see the color difference between the output and what we're seeing in our view, in our viewport down here. Now, at the moment, we have a lot of color management going on within Pixotope now, but it is only applied on the SDI output streams at the moment. So currently in this version, you'll see that this is just showing us still a Rec 709 image and not the fully shaped image here in the output. So there's a color discrepancy. That is something that we're addressing now. So we're going to apply the same view LUTs, or the view lookup tables, profiles, if you like, because everything's done in OpenColor.io and we use different ACES profiles. So we're going to apply those, but we're going to apply them also within the viewport as well, so that you won't have this color discrepancy. One thing to say on that before we go further is never trust your computer monitor for color grading. It is, unless you've set it up and you've spent time and you've used the Color Monkey or an X-Rite device to kind of adjust your monitor, you're probably not going to get the right range and gamut on that monitor. So trust when you're doing color grading and when you're making materials decisions, etc., how something's going to look at it on a proper reference monitor. It will save you so much time. Anyway, that's the first camera. The second camera we've set up is just a static camera. We put it on a tripod. We have no tracking on this, but what we've set up in a Pixotope is we've set up manual tracking. We set that up, we measured out where the tripod was, and we've adjusted it to put Dot in his seat. So as you can see at the moment, he looks quite happy in position. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about how we control multiple machines. This isn't going to take us too long at all, but let's try it. I will need director. If I can get director, let's see. We've got a delay. Yeah, I got it. No, I didn't. Couldn't somebody give me director, please? Thank you, guys. That's brilliant. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, let's go into our production tab. And we can see now if I select object here, I'm going to draw your attention to these fields here, the reread field and the machine selection and the send to and resend buttons over here. Now, this is our main machine. We can have a look. It's this computer that I want to be on, so that's fine. That's where I'm reading all my data from. And if I want to keep the same settings on both machines, if I make adjustments in Director, I want those to be sprayed out to my two machines that are listening. But they will only listen if they've been selected here. So as you can see on this drop down, this is our desktop machine that we've been using all week, and this is the studio render machine that's taking the input from the fixed camera. So what I'm going to do first of all, just show you this, I'm just going to deselect that. So now I've only got one machine selected, and I'm going to find my Dot. So I know that Dot is a blueprint, and I believe it's this guy. Let's see if he comes in. So yeah, that's the Pixapalooza mascot, and I'm going to just play with the visibility. And do I have the control of visibility? Let's see if I've got my scroll bar here. Sorry, apologies for this. Thank you whoever did that. So here's my visibility at the bottom. Let's turn that off, and Dot disappears from this. Remember, this was my main scene, my main machine, and Dot has disappeared. He's been there a long time. Let's bring him back again, and we'll go back and let's just try and access my. This is picking when you've got a seconds delay is quite difficult. So let's adjust this, bring this back in, and just to prove the point, we'll turn the visibility. So now you can see they're both acting together. Why don't we bring in a control panel? What do you think, Jonas? So would that be a nice thing to show at this time? And there we go. We have a control panel here. But so now we can control both of our machines at the same time. But maybe, have you got anything that you can help us with here, Jonas? Your audio is not on. We don't have any sound
now,
from
David.
There we go. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks
Okay, so I'm back. So I'm basically going to demonstrate two things now, both that we connected to two machines and the fact that we can trigger all of this from a smart device. So you can see this one is connected to the two machines, and I have the control panel available to me on my phone and this phone is connected to the same network as the computers. So I can hit this enter button, the green one, and make Dot go into the scene. And you should see him coming into the scene on both. That's very cool. Stop juggling, and I'm going to make him exit. So that's just a quick notes. Both you can trigger things from directly from a smart device, so we can actually showcase that.
Yeah.
We talked about it, but we haven't actually showed it. So
Yeah,
back to you,
no,
David.
that's really cool. So let me just try and resize my control panel here. And so we have all the same control settings. Whoops, I will need director back if I can get him. Could you give me director, please?
Oh yeah, and just a reminder, David, can you full screen director as well? I'm just going to do that now.
Mm-hmm.
And just a reminder to everyone in the audience that remember to, if you have a question, just write it down in the questions tab and we'll answer that during the Q&A.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yes, so we can see here that the control panel is in the same way. We can change our selection. So again, turning off this, we would then get Dot to enter from one side, but not in the other shot. So we can select how we're going to use these buttons. Typically, by the time we've got to control panels, then we're going live. And we want every machine to react at the same time. Importantly as well, we might have multiple machines set up, including some that are set as hot running backups. And the beauty of that is those machines will receive all the triggers at the same time. They will do exactly the same thing as our live machines, but it gives us another output that can go onto the switcher, onto the router, so that the director can choose that if he wishes. If we had a catastrophic failure, for example, then we can choose that live running backup. So let's exit him, bring him back on both machines, and we'll go.
Yeah, I think he is malfunctioning, David. I think you should just turn him off.
Right. There we go. He's back in both shots. Okay. So now if we juggle and chest open and close, you can see the synchronization here. Now, everything that we're doing here in control panel, we're triggering logic. But what we're doing can also be controlled importantly by using timecode triggers. So if we didn't want this to be a monkey like me sitting behind a desk pressing buttons, but we actually wanted it to be synchronized to an audio track, if we set up a timecode, then we would be able to trigger these events directly on all the machines at the same time. That's really important for live events and anything to do with music. So there we are. Dot is juggling. I think we'll stop juggling and we will where's detach arms? There we go. We'll drop his arms off and get him to say goodbye. So yeah, a bit of a defective robot, but at this point, we're at the end of our demonstration today. Hopefully we've covered the topics you were interested in. We've been through keying both in video mode and in linear mode. We've looked at post-production settings or post-volume settings in order to control bloom and color grading. We've also looked at multi-machine control and how we would set that up both to use from director and from the control panel. So at this point, we're going to take a short break for 5 minutes. We'd like you to post your questions and then we'll come back in 5 minutes and go through those with you. Thanks very much. See you very soon.
And we are back. And you can see our lovely faces again. And David, do you have sound? I think you're muted.
Yep, and now I should be with you now.
Yeah, excellent.
Cool.
Very good, David. We're just gonna give maybe one more minute just to get around and get the last questions in.
Sure.
And we will answer these together.
Excellent. It's always nice to be part of a team.
Oh yes, we're happy to have you here, David, in spirit. And
spirit would be good, beer would be better, but well, yes, that's very good.
Yeah. And just one more quick note about our setup. Obviously, this is a bit more of a complicated setup today because we are running multiple machines, we are running multiple cameras, and we're trying to give you the best possible outputs from both of those machines at the same time. And we kind of have to run back and forth from the green screen studio and back to the AR studio in order to make things work. So this is why it's a little bit messy right now, but all that considered, we'll just have to do with what we have, which is basically, yeah. Okay, shall we get started with the questions, David?
Oh yeah, that's good. Let's look at these. So there's lots of people saying they can hear us, which is great. It would be interesting, if possible, to share the boring list of the planning schedule. Yep, sure, absolutely. That's why we wrote it. We want to share this information so that you can execute your productions as seamlessly as we do ours. So yeah, we will make that available. Can you show us the same setup of bloom in linear and non-linear mode? Yep, we can certainly do that.
Let's do that. I can do that since it's easier for me to do it from here, I guess. So let's, can we get the outputs again, Magnus? All right, so we can see, yeah, we only need the one. So I'm gonna enable bloom and switch that to convolution. Just crank that up a little bit. And once again, you're not going to see the correct colors on this screen share monitor. You need to look at the output, which has the correct colors applied to it. So I'm just going to crank up this intensity. Maybe it's something like 500. Maybe that's a bit bright. We're kind of glowing out dot there, but let's focus on this light for now. See if we can bring down the threshold a little bit, like that. And we're going to go to composite. So we're currently in linear space, and take note of the output screen right now, the webcam output screen. And I'm going to switch this to video space. And you can see a very big difference. We no longer have the nice warm color tint in the lamp anymore. It looks very washed out, boring. So we can switch this back.
Basically, it's been burnt out to white. Once it gets to white, there's nowhere for it to go. So we're limiting the headroom on our colors, and we're not able to bring that detail back. That's what's happening.
Yep, excellent.
So hopefully that covers that. I mean, it wasn't shown in the Kia, where we were showing it against the hair, but a similar sort of effect. You wouldn't get the nice wrap that we were getting on the effect of the bloom on Jonas's hair and face. So,
all right.
Next question. Should be possible eventually to send an override signal in the SDI, for example, a wireframe of the scene. Example, when you start with an invisible scene and the camera operator cannot see anything in the viewer. So, yes, I mean, we are subverting. So you're correct. I mean, it would be possible to send something on the output or an output. currently we're subverting the video output to put the key channel in, for example. So it might be possible to do that. Connected to timecode. Is the timecode controllable directly in the editor for an easy use, or should you create a blueprint for that? We covered that a few days ago. Frank went in, I think, no, Jonas, you went into the baseline blueprints, didn't you?
No, Frank did.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yep.
I wasn't paying attention. Anyway, so we have a system called the baseline blueprint system, and that allows us to take any trigger information and to synchronize it with events. So you have event actors that are synchronized from BP master, and that's really quite a simple process. I'd suggest that we can send you the link for that session if you want to go into it, but effectively it allows us to link timecode events. I don't know whether we've got anything to hand that we can show that. I don't know whether it's in these current projects, but effectively it makes syncing to timecode very, very easy. And so you just put in the trigger timecode. You have to have had the right timecode coming in, so it has to be either 5994 drop frame or non-drop frame, or 50 hertz. Luckily, there's only one for 50. So one of those three types, if you pipe that into the ARJA LTC input, then we can trigger to that, and the whole of the blueprint logic takes over and will trigger your events. So that's very easy to use. So the next question, you can use large screen for green screen? Yeah, we could. I mean, we're a little cramped in our space and we're moving our lab around. So what you're seeing is the last run of our lab is being moved and the green screen's being replaced. But yes, we've got probably the smallest green screen space that you could effectively use. So ours is about 2.5 meters high by 2 meters by 2 meters with a square section floor area. But yeah, for sure, you can use much bigger green screens. You've got to make sure that your tracking works in that space, of course. But once you've done that, we're quite happy to work in whatever size green screens you like. How on earth could we manage a production remotely using a situation like we're experiencing now with COVID-19? I think to say with a lot of blood, sweat and tears might be the honest answer. We've spent quite a bit of time, and this was the most ambitious. Everything we've done till now has been run from the studio in Norway. So I'm dialing in. Probably you'll see my camera break up. We had a lot of problems earlier, but we're trying to do remote control from there. So yeah, we're learning with this process as well, and we're working out on the fly, as you saw today. So we had a few problems along the way, but hopefully that just shows you the sorts of things that can go wrong in live productions. I mean, we're just emulating the real world. Hello, green screen can be in 2 different places. Green screen in London can be entered in feed, be a studio in Qatar. What do you think on this one, Jonas? I think this is a question of one machine is deriving our key, and that can be fed as a channel. I mean, it's perfectly possible to feed to do this sort of thing. The problem really is the latency. You know, with long distance feeds like that, is you can see the problems we've got from Norway to London, and the delays there. With the video, it's going to make it. There's going to be timing issues. You might have lip sync issues and this sort of thing. So your audio would have to be heavily delayed. There's no reason in principle why you can't do it though. It's perfectly feasible to do, but the real impediment here is the physical nature of, you know, light moves at a finite speed, and so getting the information from one side of the world to the other always takes time. So once you understand that and you can mitigate that, then it's perfectly possible to do this sort of thing. Okay, and then some thanks. Thank you for an awesome week. Really appreciate the opportunity to learn from you guys. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. We've really enjoyed
so much
working with everybody this whole week, the whole 7 days. I've luckily been lurking for most of the time and answering questions, but all of us are very grateful for you giving up your days and spending time to learn about Pixotope. And we're hoping to bring you yet more Pixotope goodness in the future. So if you can bring up the next slide. So that's for your trial licenses. Do you want to take this one?
Trial license?
No.
So, right. So that actually concludes the main Pixapalooza webinars. We have had 7 of them now, which has been an amazing, crazy experience. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for sticking with us for this long and being so interested in learning Pixotope. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank everyone at TFG who's been working so hard to get this production going. So great job there, David, presenting this session. Great job, Frank, for presenting various of the other sessions. Great job to Magnus for making everything run, making sure that the camera moves. And just this has been a team effort of everyone in the company making this webinar happen.
Joachim behind the scenes has been working the webinar software and lashing us to make us attend sessions and rehearsals. So he's been, and he's also had the virus as well. So he's been working for the whole time.
Yeah.
So big thanks to Joachim for that.
Yeah, definitely. This has been a crazy, crazy week. And on the final note of that, this is not the end of Pixapalooza. We're gonna take an Easter break now, but starting in mid-April, we're gonna give you more Pixapalooza goodness, where we're gonna show you, among other things, this RT workflow integration with Pixotope, most playlists, pages on Pixotope with Rizzo Studio, motion capture and Pixotope, Stipe follower and Pixotope, and that's going to be hosted by a creative powerhouse, all of it now. And we hope to see you all again after Easter. And until then, we hope that you all take care, stay inside, stay healthy, take care of each other. And we hope to see you all again after the Easter. So thank you so much for watching, everyone.
Stay well, stay happy.
All right.
Outro.